right, looks good. Like Wayne said, we had 2 requests for excused absences, one from Tappan and one from Ken. I move to excuse both of those members from the meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Thanks, Mark. After reviewing the minutes from our meeting on August 6th, are there any comments, requests for edits and revisions to that? All right, say no for now. I move to approve the minutes from our August 6th meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Jermon, I cannot see your screen right now.
Okay, I vote in favor.
All right, great. So that's unanimous, and I think I skipped the vote for the excused absences. Is that correct? So, all in favor of providing those excused absences? All right, that one passes unanimously as well. And Wayne, I think we are ready for your updates and other matters of importance.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. First up, I would like to introduce Sarah Ellis of our Planning and Development Services Department. Sarah is the project manager of a study called the Dix Edge Study, which is looking at the immediate vicinity around Dix Park and looking at development implications. And she suggested and we agreed that it would be a good idea for her to give a brief update of that study to the commission and ask for any assistance or any suggestions related to that. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Sarah, and I think she has a couple of slides. Kelly, if you could bring those up, perhaps, please.
Thanks for the introduction, Wayne, and I'm ready to get started as soon as those slides are up. Or I can also share my screen if that's preferable.
Yeah, you got presentation right now, Sarah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't. You said you have the presentation, or you wanted me to share my screen?
Yes, you can share your screen.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yes, I will do that now. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Ellis. I work for the City of Raleigh in the Planning Department, and thank you for the opportunity to let me share some information about a project that our department is just now kicking off. Just our goal has been to provide some information to all the boards and commissions that have goals that overlap with the work of the study. So that's why we're here, or why I am here today, to provide you with just 3 brief slides with some information, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions after that. So the Dix Edge Area Study is a planning land use study that is covering the neighborhoods on the eastern side of Dix Park. And you can see that on the map on the right-hand side of my screen that has them on the non-opaque areas. So the neighborhoods, generally speaking, are Carolee, Fuller Heights, and then a bit of Carolina Pines when you get beneath south of 40. We have a public kickoff plan for the study, and it's going to take about 18 months. So we're just getting started, and we'll be working on this through January of 2022. The study is going to focus on those topics that you see in green on the left-hand side of the screen. So equity, displacement, affordable housing, land use, stormwater as well, although it is not called out specifically in there, but that is a topic that we'll be exploring. So things of that nature. And generally speaking, we are beginning this study because with investments like Dix Park, there's a lot of development interest in that area. And folks are probably familiar with, for example, the Downtown South proposal is also located in this study area. So our intention is to look at planning for the future over the next 20 years, knowing that there may be a lot of change coming, but that we can work with the community to look at what that change should look like with their input. Just wanted to show briefly a floodplain map, as I thought it would be of particular interest to this commission. So the area does have a bit of floodplain in it because we also have the Walnut Creek Walnut Creek runs through the south of the study area. So generally what you're looking at is, again, the map of the study area, but with the floodplain called on in it. And just what I will highlight for you is downtown south is proposed in areas that may touch upon some of the floodplains. So I'm sure that will be review that staff will be completing as that project proceeds through. And then part of why we've been approaching boards and commissions of this phase in the project is that we have a large public engagement focus. We're looking to recruit 2 different volunteer groups, the first of which are, we're calling them neighborhood ambassadors. Those would be 2 individuals that live or work or have a deep connection to the neighborhood, and that they would be assisting us for about 10 to 15 hours a month and be paid a $15 an hour stipend for their time. And then we're also looking to recruit 10 to 15 folks for a community leader group, and they'd just be a group of stakeholders that work, live, or have some type of connection to the area, and they would sort of help guide the planning process and provide input throughout the way and sort of act as a check when planning staff brings forth recommendations, that this group would also review them and sort of confirm that they, yes, they do reflect their lived experience, or no, perhaps we missed the mark and we need to revisit a couple things. And just the last thing I'll mention on that is our staff has been making a significant effort to reach the renters in the area, and we have been coming up a bit short on that. So if folks had any connections to the Walnut Terrace or the Gateway Park communities, those are areas that we would very much like to engage with, since they haven't been represented through our application process yet, and we just want to make sure that those folks are included. So that's the end of my presentation. And I will stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have. And thank you again for your time.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions from commission members for Ms. Ellis? Yeah, Glenn.
I have a question about the 10 to 15 hour or $10 to $15 per hour stipend. What is that for? Is that to offset like driving, or is it an hourly wage? What's it for? Because it says volunteer.
That's correct. So it is a 10 to 15 hour stipend to compensate people for their time, recognizing that this is not a full-time job position that we're offering, but that when we ask community members to spend their time and their social media resources or use their own networks to put the word out, that they should be compensated for that time.
And you feel that's a reasonable amount for someone who's going to step into that role?
That is what the city has decided, yes.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for Ms. Ellis? All right. I don't see any other questions, but Sarah, thank you very much for sharing that with us today. We really appreciate it. We look forward to seeing how that progresses as time goes.
Jonathan, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
sorry. Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned that the timeline for the study is 18 months. How does that line up with the timeline for the Downtown South project?
Sure, so I can give a big picture overview of the Downtown South project. Currently, they have submitted a rezoning application, and that application is incomplete right now because it is pending a traffic impact analysis. This traffic impact analysis will take a couple of months, but there's a caveat to that because there's no set timeline on that. The traffic impact analysis relies on the applicant, being Downtown South in this case, going through a fairly extensive engineering review process and them responding back to city comments. So it's often a couple months of back and forth followed by a planning commission review that could also take a couple of months. But again, that timeline isn't set in stone. It simply depends on how many matters the commission has in front of them and how much time they would like to take to discuss the matter. And after they receive the rezone, should their rezoning request be approved, then they would be granted the ability to construct the project. But they're probably looking at least another 6 to 8 months of going through the rezoning process before they would receive any entitlements should it be approved.
Thank you. And so you're, I guess, Mr. Page or Ms. Ellis, I think what you're looking for is just the commission to share the word and encourage folks who are inclined to volunteer, right?
Yes, that would be fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. All right, sir. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And Wayne, are you up next again?
I am, yes. A few more items I'd like to share under the hot topics. I did want to give an update on the White Oak Lake project, and I think I've mentioned this a couple of times. This has been a what we consider a legacy project that's been considered for our CIP for quite a few years now. There have been some recent developments related. This lake, just very quickly, is right adjacent to I-440 on the west side of Raleigh. It had been proposed for a lake rehabilitation project. It's privately owned right now. And there's been some recent developments that have occurred. Dam safety did an inspection of the dam and found it to have a number of safety violations, and as such issued an order to say that giving a specific period that a plan needed to be submitted for the dam to either be repaired or breached. And that was sent to the two owners of the dam, which are White Oak Lake Incorporated and NCDOT, because of DOT's easement that covers a portion of the lake from I-440. So right now the city has no ownership or easements on the lake or dam. And that order has triggered DOT to develop a breach plan, and they do plan to breach the dam in response to this order. So this is basically created a number of legal issues related to easements and other legal risks if the city were to try to move forward with the project right now, and the timeline is indefinite. So we are proposing to put the project on indefinite hold. And because it is a substantial project, it was budgeted for a little over $4.5 million. We are proposing to reallocate the CIP funding for that project to a number of other projects that we'd had to borrow funding before. One is Western Northridge. That's a significant project. Another one is to basically pay back some of the drainage assistance funding that we had used for the buyouts. Many of you will recall that discussion, and several other smaller projects that Stormwater sees as a high priority to move forward in the near future. So I really just wanted to give the commission an advance notice that we are planning to make this proposal. There's no action needed by the commission. This will be a council item, basically, and we plan to bring it to City Council at their October 6th meeting. And we'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have on this, but really just wanted to give you an advance notice of our plans.
Hey, Wayne, what was the proposed scope of work originally for that project?
Yeah, the proposed scope of work was to really reconstruct the entire dam for the White Oak Lake, and really to move it off of the easement that for I-440 because of the widening project through there, and to do significant upgrades to the dam and spillway to basically bring it up to current standards. There's some water quality benefits to the lake, a little bit of flood control benefits, but when we've looked at the downstream Simmons Branch flood control project, which you'll recall has recently been completed, we were able to make some upgrades as part of that project that all of the flood level of service conditions through that neighborhood are met, even without any storage in the upstream White Oak Lake. So we're comfortable that that project meets our flood standards there, and that the White Oak Lake project is not a necessary component to any flood control in that area.
Sounds good. Thanks, Wayne.
Sure. Any other questions on that item?
Yeah, Wayne, it's Mark. I just wanted to find out, are the homeowners aware of this? I mean, I know it's going to be a legal issue for them, but
They initially owned all of that lake, and then DOT came in and took a right of way that grabbed a portion of the dam, and now they're talking about taking their portion out. It seems like they're going to be losing their dam when the DOT really didn't have the authority to take it away in the first place. So I have a feeling they're probably pretty excited about it. I just want to find out if they're aware of it and have weighed in on it.
They are, Mark. Yeah, we've been in contact with a number of the owners around the lake, and interestingly enough, there's some ownership issues related to a legal settlement back from the 80s that allocates some maintenance responsibilities for the lake and dam throughout the entire neighborhood, even though there's not a homeowners association. So it became a very complicated legal and ownership issue.
Yeah, I was aware of that and had worked with them on that with the original owner in the homeowners association.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, for a number of reasons, it became a high legal risk to even get involved. Like I said, the city doesn't have any ownership or easement right now. And with all of the legal risk associated with that lake right now, we thought it best to at least indefinitely defer moving forward on the project and get involved in the legal actions that likely or possibly could come forward out of that, the lake being drained.
Yeah, I mean, I support the city stepping back and let that, you know, the three entities involved, the DOT, the underlying property owner and the HOA. Sort things out. You know, my position was DOT should work with HOA on that originally, but they have not been doing that. So it'll be interesting to see how that one works out. Thanks, Wayne.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate your comments. Any other questions on that one? Okay. The next item I had quickly, and I'd like to turn it over to Kevin Boyer, because we got some good news from a grant award. And Kevin, would you please give a quick update on that project?
Glad to. This is in Biltmore Hills Park in Southeast Raleigh, in the drainage area of Rochester Branch to Walnut Creek. The Water Resources Research Institute of North Carolina State University, working with partners in the neighborhood, with Raleigh Stormwater folks, and with people in our Parks Department, have partnered to apply for a grant from the State Department of Environmental Quality. But it is federal funds run through the State Department of Environmental Quality. We have been selected, or NC State in this case has been selected with us as a partner to design and construct stormwater treatment retrofits within the park. And retrofits in this case, it literally means not in association with any development or new development, working with what's already there. The specific locations and types of stormwater treatment devices remains to be evaluated, but we have preliminary locations and types identified in the grant with the assistance of an engineering firm, Chris Bass Engineering, working with the Water Resources Research Institute. And it'll be some combination of a bioretention treatment of parking lot runoff and building runoff, possibly bioswales, and possibly rainwater harvesting. But that's the early part of the project to identify those, and then later design them, construct them, turn them over to the city to be incorporated into our infrastructure, our inventory of stormwater devices. Again, the lead will be the Water Resources Research Institute. The city, stormwater is contributing up to $100,000 of a total of, I don't have the exact amount here, but on the order of $350,000 total project costs. And it'll take a while for those for the grant contract to get into place, but we look forward to that project starting up in early calendar year 2021. Amy Farinelli with water quality within the stormwater division took the lead on working with WRI on that grant application and interview and award.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Anyone have questions for Kevin?
That's great news, Kevin. Who are you guys working with WRI?
Christy Perrin and one of her interns, Grace Fulmer.
That'd be awesome. Great.
Yeah, good work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We're very excited about that project. And then actually another item, Kevin, if you don't mind, please giving a quick update. And I know Mark will likely have some input and comments on update on the Gsi Committee.
Sure. In fact, Mark, would you like to kick that off and I'll come in behind you?
Yeah, let me go ahead and kick that off. Yeah, the GSI subcommittee of the SMAC committee met on August 26th. Kevin did a great job of bringing us up to speed on where things were going. Most of the meeting focused on potentially applying the GSI to demonstration projects. It looks like the ones that are going to be initially applied to are city projects. I'll let Kevin talk a little bit more about those. And the second part of the meeting was talking about incentives that have been developed to incentivize the use of GSI on private development in terms of monetary things, speeding up permit review processes and other things. I'm a little disappointing to hear that we're not getting a lot of traction on that, mostly because the incentives aren't big enough to get people motivated to try something new and different, you know, when they can just do the same old thing and not have to worry about it. And so there's a lot of discussion about what can be done to improve those incentives. One of the big challenges that the city's stormwater utility fee, because the city is so efficient and so good at this, is so low that they can't, you know, provide a credit for that fee that's much of an incentive. You know, if you're only paying, you know, $5 per month for ERU, it's not, you know, get a full credit isn't even enough to justify it. So we've got to get our heads together and start thinking about ways of improving that incentive program to motivate more people to try and apply GSI in their new development projects or expansions. And I'll let Kevin talk about the park projects that maybe the next round of applying it and testing it out.
Thanks, Mark. And as Mark mentioned, we're really focusing in with the committee on two areas for reporting back to the city council. One is the GSI policy for the city to use for when and how GSI should be considered and selected and then documented on city-led projects, CIP projects largely. And then also what incentives might be brought for the private sector to use GSI. And that might seemingly be not so related, but they are related to the extent that much of the private sector is waiting and watching to see what the city does in our interest in advancing the use of GSI. It's not as if we have nothing on the ground and nothing to show, but in terms of large development projects, we've yet to really get GSI integrated into our own large development projects. So we've now selected two pretty high profile projects. One is Chavis Park, most focused on the next phase 2 expansion, which includes an aquatic center and associated facilities, and also the downtown civic campus where the Raleigh Municipal Building is now. We're pretty far along on evaluating GSI at Chavis Park. We're just now getting started on the downtown civic campus. We've worked out our collaboration arrangements with other divisions and departments with how to proceed on that. We have some meetings set up to transfer information and get our consultant Tetra Tech started on that, started next week. On the incentives side, We've only introduced the topic to the committee and gotten started, and Mark suggested that to maybe make some better use of our committee time, that he and I and some other staff get together between committee meetings and between commission meetings and line out some thoughts to give the committee maybe a little more to react to than we have been doing so far. So Mark and I are looking at our calendars for when to do that. We've also put out a doodle poll for scheduling the next GSI committee meeting, and thank you for your responses to that poll. It's looking like we're going to schedule that for the afternoon of September 28th or September 29th. So stay tuned. Should make that decision in the next day or so and get out an invitation get it on your calendar in pencil in the next couple of days, and then get out an invitation within the next week. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. And then the last item is now a permanent agenda item, notices of construction. I mentioned that as a new suggestion from the city attorney's office that we give notification. It's in addition to notifications to the neighborhood that we give to be in compliance with state law. But this one it would go more broadly, obviously, as well, although there's no additional projects to report this month. But you'll see that on every item, every agenda moving forward. And that's all we have, Mr. Chair.
Great, thanks, Wayne. Really appreciate that. Dale, are you ready to take us through your drainage assistance projects for review?
As ready as I'll ever be.
All right, let's do it.
All right, just let me know as soon as you can see the presentation.
Yep, we've got it. Thank you, Dale.
All right, so this is the program project review for September. Given sort of the delay in meeting through the pandemic, this will be the first round of review for fiscal year 21. So we've transitioned from last month or the previous month up to that, from fiscal year 20 funding to now new fiscal year 21 funding of $1.5 million. So just like in past presentations, we'll go through our pending list, the top 4 that we're presenting today, their locations, and look at some funding impacts for those 4 locations up for recommendation today. I put all 4 together with the potential to vote on all 4 at the end. If we'd like to split them up as we go through them with specific questions, so happy to do that as well. So looking at the pending projects list, top 28 shown on your screen. You should have been provided the full list in your backup that I think is now around 87 projects. So given the full fiscal year funding, looking at presenting 4 projects today for recommendation: 305 Cambridge Woods Way, 2809 Newbold Street, 11817 Fairley Place, and kind of the 3500 block of East Jamison Street. Those are the top 4 on the priority ranking. So those are the 4 that we're going to look at today. Location. These 4 projects are kind of located throughout the city. Pretty wide swath, even one almost into Durham County with Fairley Place. So see on the map there all the different locations of the 4 projects. First project, 305 Cambridge Woods Way. You can see it was platted in 1987 and built in 1989. Essentially not included on the screen, but upstream. I'll try to use my pointer. Hopefully you can see it. Upstream of this intersection of essentially Lake Boone Trail and Edinburgh is Edinburgh Street, Yarmouth Road, and Chesterfield Road. Those streets do not have curb and gutter. Significant homes in that area have been redeveloped much like you can sort of see the redevelopment that has kind of occurred on a single family basis on Lake Boone Trail. Kind of circling my cursor to be larger. Increased runoff is coming, down the streets and is trying to essentially needs to be collected at this intersection of Lake Boone Trail and Edinburgh. Water flows collected by a curb inlet here at the intersection of Lake Boone and Edinburgh, flows along this small sort of concrete channel here before that channel ends, and the water sort of disperses throughout the properties here, resulting in pretty significant yard flooding for these 3 homes, crawl space flooding, specifically at 305 Cambridge Woods Way. There's also the amount of water that comes in and flows into this cul-de-sac. There's also some street flooding that results in Cambridge Woods Way. And given sort of the lack of definition of any sort of conveyance here with fencing and trees, 305 Cambridge Woods Way experiences crawl space flooding on a pretty regular basis, multiple times a year. While not overly deep in the crawl space, it does happen on a very frequent basis. So here's sort of where the water goes. This is the intersection of Lake Boone Trail and Edinburgh. This is the inlet. You can kind of see in the picture the little concrete channel that exists. Water does go around this curb inlet as the curbing sort of stops, runs through the yard, and that's some of the spreading of the runoff that occurs, and where that keeps it from being confined to sort of one single area. This project, we're going to look to resolve it. We're not 100% sure what might be the best approach for resolution. So part of the analysis with the surveying and the design analysis is to look at potentially 2 different routes. One sort of along the existing route of cutting in a more defined, more adequate conveyance swell ditch from the outlet of the system at Lake Boone Trail through the yards, through the backyards, and connecting to the inlet that's located there at the back of 305 Cambridge Woods Way, and probably some inlet or piping upgrades at that specific location to receive the runoff. That's one option. As I mentioned before, and I'll actually go back, this is the route that system would take. There's a lot of mature trees there. There's a lot of fencing, not significant fencing in terms of brick, 10 to 12 foot tall, privacy fencing, so not just standard picket fencing or wood fencing. So poses a potential challenge of running a system in that general direction. The other potential option that we would look at for this one is some sort of piping, diversion and piping of the system into the right of way. So, the shown for schematics is tied to the system here. There's the potential that the system is undersized and may need to be upgraded, or the potential to ensure that downstream pipes are adequate within the right of way. There may be the need to provide maybe some detention or attenuation in the piping system itself. So any questions on Cambridge Woods Way before we transition to the next project?
Yeah, just a quick question. Oh, somebody else jump in there.
Oh, hey, thanks, Mark. Dale, how would you classify this in terms of a root cause? You gave a good presentation to us last month about root causes of drainage assistance interventions. Mm-hmm. Where would you categorize this?
I think I would categorize this as upstream development. Upstream development, post-stormwater rules.
Yeah, and that's you mentioned redevelopment in particular. So that's post-stormwater rules. Post-stormwater
rules. Some of the development is pre-TC2 rules. Okay. So pre the requirements of sort of the thresholds and the requirements for single-family residential redevelopment.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And I guess that kind of addressed my question. It was going to be, it's fairly recent development. You know, what have we done and what could we do to avoid these kinds of problems in the future?
Yeah, you know, that's a difficult question at times to answer. You know, I think the TC2 has done a lot for sort of regulating single-family redevelopment, especially in areas inside the Beltline that has occurred or is occurring. You know, one of the hard parts about this, you know, specific issue, and we do see it throughout the city, is drainage has been intended to go one way in one direction, and that's, you know, usually following the topo. But private property owners through the years obviously put fencing up. You know, trees grow, things change, and you know, I won't say maybe a potential lack of maintenance, but the old channel, the old direction of flow may not be the same as it originally was intended when the subdivision or the houses were originally built. So that's another sort of contributing factor.
Hey Dale, just for the newer commission members, could you clarify what you mean by the TC2 changes for small site development?
Yeah, and if Ben wouldn't mind jumping in, he can maybe be a little bit better at responding than I. But essentially, stormwater rules for development up until 2016 didn't really apply for sort of infill development. TC2 made a revision that sort of capped the amount of impervious area that could be on a lot in those situations where it was a redevelopment of a single family house. Is that, Ben, you wanna?
Yeah. Dale did a really good job of kind of summing that up. But basically, the smaller residential lots were exempt from the Neuse River stormwater rules, and that's actually basin-wide. So in 2016, Raleigh enacted something that would kind of look at some of the infill development that we were seeing, where we're seeing smaller houses get torn down and larger houses get put back on those same lots. And so we had an impervious cap put on these lots for their redevelopment, starting from the fall of 2016 on to like today.
Good, thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Are there any other questions for Dale on the Cambridge Woods Way project? All right, Dale, I think we're ready for the next one.
All right, we'll move on. This is 2809 Newbold Street. It was built in 1952. Built in 1953, platted in 1952. An older section of development in the Wildcat drainage basin. For this particular issue, the 36-inch reinforced concrete pipe that actually starts over on the property of 2810 Newbold Place, runs under Newbold Place within the right-of-way, and then exits on 2809 Newbold Place. Has joint separation. The pipe has shown failure. It is showing signs of failure in multiple locations with joint separation and sinkholes. Numerous sinkholes exist upstream of Newbold Place on the property of 2810 and downstream on 2809 Newbold Place. Biggest sort of issue is the sinkhole that occurs here that is within 7 feet of the foundation of 2809 Newbold Place. That is sort of the safety concern around Newbold Place. The other issue that is occurring in this specific location is downstream of the outlet of 2809 Newbold Place. Work was done back in 2009, 2010, and either through lack of maintenance or maybe potentially beavers or some other issue. The channel here doesn't have a lot of slope, and the outlet of the 36-inch pipe is actually inundated with water, even without it raining. Which obviously reduces capacity of the pipe. So this section of Newbold actually has street flooding that occurs on a regular basis. So, a couple of photos to illustrate this. If you can see through there, that's actually the outlet of the 36-inch pipe. 2809 Newbold underwater there. The condition exists always. And then on the right, there's actually a sinkhole that's showing here, and there's actually 2 locations of sinkholes that actually have been repaired in the right of way. And then not really clear in the picture is the sinkhole that's on 2809 here. That's close to the foundation. So sort of multiple failures throughout. A sinkhole approaching a foundation of a structure, and then street flooding, sort of the prioritizing factors of this specific project. We think essentially that if we can regrade the outlet swell and ditch for positive flow to get the water off of the pipe system, that we can slip line the existing pipe without having to replace it, to extend its service life and give us a reduced cost for the project. So it's the plan for Newbold Street. It's a little bit of the background, and I'm happy to answer any questions on Newbold Street as well.
Great, thanks, Dale. Any questions on Newbold Street from commission members? All right, Dale, I'm not seeing any questions right now, so we'll move on to the next one at Fairley Place.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jonathan. 11817 Fairley Place, platted in 1989, built in 1994. If you remember from the project location map, this is the one that's almost in Durham County. This one, very similar to Newbold Place. Joint separations are occurring throughout the 18-inch RCP pipe that actually runs from North Exeter Way to Fairley Place, with the closest sinkhole erosion area within 7 feet of the foundation of the house at 11817 Fairley Place. So a couple pictures. Here's the one of the sinkholes that's closest to the foundation of 1187 Fairley Place. This is owner gentleman with his leg in a sinkhole there along the fence line that's showing them the multiple failures along the pipe route. Much like Newbold, we think, just given the joint separation, that we should be able to provide an in-situ repair in terms of slip lining the 18-inch RCP pipe from North Exeter Way to Fairley Place, thus helping to reduce some of the cost of the project and not having to remove and replace. Is there any questions on Fairley Place?
Just a comment. I'm looking at this one and the one before it, and it seems like failures may be taking place on private property, but I'm assuming that the solution to this is inspecting these drainage systems that are installed. And I know we're inspecting them on the right of way, but I don't believe the city is inspecting them on private property yet, to make sure they're installed properly. Is that something that we need to look into so we can avoid these in the future, or how do we not have to fix these things 20 years from now when we're putting them in the ground?
Yeah, that's great. And we actually are looking into it as a potential of the redevelopment or the update to the stormwater design manual. So in developing the update to the stormwater design manual, there are some checklists and some requirements in there for post-construction CCTV of installed stormwater infrastructure, to hopefully for this exact reason, to identify areas where the pipe may have not been installed correctly, and have the contractor fix it as part of the development, versus drainage assistance having to address it at 10 or 15 years down the road when it really starts to appear.
Sounds good.
Great. Any other questions for Dale on Fairley Place?
Okay.
So Wayne, it looks like you're talking, but I think you're on mute right now.
Yeah, I was. Thank you, Jonathan. I did have one quick suggestion. You've mentioned, Dale, you mentioned slip lining on this project, and in the last, maybe a 30-second explanation of that construction technique for those members who aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, sure thing. So slip lining is or in situ pipe repair. There's multiple types. Is basically providing a smaller pipe inside the larger pipe that exists presently, just to secure up the joints. Essentially the inside pipe, the pipe that you would be placing inside the exterior pipe would be, either some sort of grout material would be placed between the two to secure it up, or there's other mechanisms. There's what's called a cured in place plastic liner, which actually goes into the pipe. It's inflated, and then it's actually cured and hardened, and it makes a really hard plastic sort of liner. But all the, we haven't specifically defined exactly which form of slip lining will do, but essentially it involves some sort of material or pipe that would be placed inside the pipe that exists there today. Therefore, sort of eliminating the failure and the joint failure and the other failure of the existing pipe. Thanks, Wayne.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dale. Yeah, and it's a big advantage because it really eliminates or almost eliminates the need for excavation. So it's often less expensive, less disruptive to the surrounding area, utilities, roadways, and so forth. So yeah, thanks, Dale. I just thought that was a good explanation to help out.
Yeah, sure thing.
Great. Any other questions for Dale on this one? All right, Dale, I'm not seeing any other questions right now, so let's move on to the last one.
Okay, sounds good. This is 3505, 3509, 3513 East Jameson Place. Each one platted in 1985, built in 1986. Braywick Road exists just to the north, and this cul-de-sac that you can see in the top of the picture is actually Denbell Circle, public right-of-way. And the single inlet on Denbell Circle takes all the cul-de-sac runoff pipes to the back of the properties on Denbell Circle, and that drainage is left to sort of follow natural ground and topography through the properties of 3505, 3509, 3513 East Jameson. Pretty significant yard flooding exists at 3505 and 3509 East Jameson, but the larger issue is the crawl space flooding that occurs at 3513 East Jameson Place. Much like the first one, 305 Cambridge Woods Way, crawl space flooding occurs, while not overly deep in nature, frequently, essentially after almost every rainfall event. Property owners have to deal with flooding running into their crawl space at 3513 East Jameson. Property owners have tried to build some retaining walls and do some grading work to keep the water out. Up to this point, that has been unsuccessful. So this one looked to establish a conveyance swale to better define the drainage from the rear of the properties, 3505 East Jameson, down the back of the property, 3509, 3513, before turning sort of west and connecting to the existing drainage system that's not shown, but there's a 30-inch pipe that is here, kind of where my cursor is, that carries water through the neighborhood of East Jameson. Kind of the Broadlands neighborhood. So, any questions around East Jameson Place?
Just a comment. It's good to see you guys using an open channel to see if you can solve this one. I'm sure the property owners are pressing for a pipe.
Yeah, they would obviously prefer a pipe. Just as a side thought, also along those lines, Mark, is there is an apartment complex with some potential unused space back here. The fencing for these apartments are sort of off here. Obviously, when we're working through sort of the design, the analysis, we may reach out to that property and see if there's any sort of interest in maybe providing, a wider, flatter conveyance that may allow some infiltration or water quality benefit, in addition to just resolving the drainage assistance issue.
I just want to concur with Mark's comment on that. I'm glad to see a plan to keep things open, the creek or drainage, whatever it may be. Thanks.
Right. Yep. Sure thing. If there's no other questions, East Jameson, to give you do a little rundown on funding. Estimated cost for design and construction for Cambridge Woods Way at $350,000. 2809 Newbold, 150,000. 11817 Fairleigh Place, 75,000, and then East Jameson drainage improvements at 68,000. Cambridge Woods Way's estimated cost is slightly elevated due to the unknown nature of the route that we're going to end up taking. If we do the preferred route, or the best alternative is for the route to be within the right of way, that obviously increases costs with other existing utilities and any roadway improvements or curb and gutter replacement, asphalt replacement that goes along with that. Those four projects total $643,000 of the $1.5 million annual budget. That would bring our remaining balance for fiscal 21 down to $857,000. So, any questions regarding funding? Okay, and if there's no questions at this point, it would a vote for recommendation for approval would be great, so that we could carry these forward to the City Council for approval.
Great, thanks, Dale. Any final thoughts on those four projects from Dale, or are we ready to make a motion and vote? All right, so is there a motion to approve the four projects that Dale has presented here today?
Move for approval.
There's a second.
Second.
All right, Evan, and go ahead and vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Dale, that passed unanimously. Thank you very much for the presentation today.
Thank you all.
Great. All right, so I think we've got Wayne and Ben up next, covering our flood-prone area regulations, the update and communications plan going forward. So Wayne and or Ben, we're ready when you are.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start off and then turn it over to Ben, and then we also have Sorry, getting a little feedback there. We also have Kristen Freeman, who's our communications analyst, will assist as well. Kelly, if you could bring up the slides, please. I'll go ahead and get started. I did want to start off giving a little bit of a review. It's been a long process. I know many of you have been through this. I know there's a couple new commission members who have not been involved, so I wanted to give a little bit of a brief history of where we've been before I talk about where we're going on the next steps. So this process really started in fall of 2018. And next slide, please, Kelly. You can go ahead into the schedule graphic, please. When we had Hurricane Florence, and as many of you, as you're aware, Eastern North Carolina had some very devastating impacts from that storm. Raleigh was forecast to have some very significant rainfall, up to 15 inches or so, which would have been a historic storm for us. Thankfully, we dodged the bullet, but it did get people's attention. And as a result, the city council asked us to look at the city's floodplain regulations and gave SMAC the assignment to do that. And staff supported. We did go through, reviewed the existing regulations. We formed a stakeholders group, really what I'd call a focus group, with representatives of a number of groups that have direct interest in the floodplain regulations and development regulations in Raleigh, and went through a lengthy stakeholders review process looking at potential changes. That process included community input, a survey, communications and outreach, where we got input from about 400 citizens related to flooding issues and what they were seeing in Raleigh that was incorporated into the stakeholders' recommendations. Stakeholders then sent those recommendations to the commission. Commission reviewed those, sent a final set of recommendations to city council, and that was just this past winter. And at that point, council thanked us for the work, asked us to do a couple of things. One, they wanted to look at an economic analysis to see what the potential impacts would be on city funds from the development regulation changes to restrict floodplain development, new development in the floodplain. Wanted to propose a communications plan, as well as a little bit more feedback on the text change process. So that's where we are, and we wanted to give you a preview of what we are proposing to take to city council in response to those questions. So next slide, please. A quick review for those of you who don't recall or weren't involved at this time. Our current regulations, which were last changed in 2016, say that there's no fill or obstruction allowed in the floodway. Now, that's the specific area that's very near the channel, that's defined by FEMA. And so, in addition, residential structures, finished floor must be 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation. But now in the floodway fringe, which is the area also close to the channel, but really where it's mostly a backup of storage during a flood event in the outskirts away from the channel, our current regulations do allow that 50% of that floodway fringe can be filled or obstructed. And then there's an exemption that parcels of half an acre or less recorded previous to the last major change in 2006 are exempted from that 50% lot coverage. Next slide, please. A couple of other items in the current regulations. Current commercial structures can be elevated or flood proofed 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation. And then all buildings must comply with the International Building Code. So it's a real quick review. Next slide, please. So from the lengthy stakeholders group recommendations that were considered by the commission, and then what the commission took forward to council were these recommendations. First of all, there were recommendations to exempt parcels that are 1/2 acre or less, subdivided between the 2006 exemption and the effective date of these changes. Existing development not subdivided after that effective date would be exempt. Parcels that meet one or both of those exemptions could be recombined and still maintain the exemption. And then the previous exemption of the 1/2 acres or less parcels before 2006, that would remain the same. Next slide, please. So here's the biggest change that's being proposed, and that is to restrict new development in the floodway fringe. So in the graphic there, the blue area, which is closest to the channel, that's the floodway. So under our current regulations, there's no development allowed in that floodway, but the proposed change would extend those same restrictions on development to the floodway fringe, which is the lighter area, the pinkish or reddish area that's on the outskirts of the floodway. Excuse me, next slide, please. And here's a quick list of the prohibited uses, not exhaustive, but for example, new construction structures, manufactured homes, chemical storage facilities, solid waste disposal. So those are prohibited in the floodway now. They would also be prohibited in the floodway fringe under the proposed change. Now, not everything is prohibited. There are some allowed uses. Here's some examples: farming, pasture, plants or nurseries, wildlife sanctuary, gardens, parking areas are allowed, golf courses, tennis courts, picnic grounds, parks, greenway, bridges, bikeways, and so forth are still allowed under the proposed change. Next slide, please. So there are a few other recommendations, and maintain dry access with new public roads during the 100-year storm to the new development. And then there will be changes and improvements to the community rating system as a result of this, we expect. And we've mentioned that we're going through this rating system process to get Raleigh re-rated right now. And at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ben Brown, our stormwater administrator, also our floodplain manager, to talk about the rating system. Ben? I think.
All right, thank you, Wayne. As Wayne stated, the community rating system is basically something that was created through the National Flood Insurance Program to incentivize communities to go above and beyond the FEMA baseline regulations. And if they were to do this, they would get flood insurance discounts for all their citizens that have flood insurance within their jurisdiction. So essentially, the lower your CRS rating, the higher your flood insurance discount for your citizens. So staff right now is working to get Raleigh enrolled. Currently, for insurance stat wise, we have about 2,000 policies or policy holders that are in Raleigh, and they pay about $1.9 million every year in premiums, and that insures about $548 million worth of structures. Next slide, please, Kelly. So basically, like I said, the lower the CRS rating, the better your discount. And so we are targeting right now, without the floodplain text change, about a CRS rating of 7. So we feel with the new floodplain regulation changes, we go up to at least a 6, and that would mean a difference in 5% as far as for the flood insurance reduction on there. So that's a pretty big deal as far as insurance premiums to kind of take that kind of discount away based on this ordinance change. Next slide. And then also, as far as other actions that you all had recommended last year, was more funding for a buyout program, basically to kind of steer those properties that maybe now can't or shouldn't develop, that are in completely in the floodplain, that the the city would have a stockpile of money to go in and buy out those properties as well to ensure that there's no sort of development even moving forward through any variances or anything like that. Incorporate language into our Unified Development Ordinance or UDO to allow access to the National Flood Insurance Program's Cost of Compliance Program, which will help existing structures that are in the floodplain that were built prior to flood maps being out there, and so prior to like 1978, and kind of help them with ways to retrofit their buildings to make sure they're not as susceptible to flooding and more resilient in that regard, and also to develop more floodplain communication and education. Next slide. One thing the staff had recommended as part of this is actually one of our stakeholders that was on the stakeholder group was our flood insurance rep with the state of North Carolina, Milton Carpenter, and he thought that it would be a good idea for Raleigh to adopt the state model ordinance, or at least the structure of the state model ordinance, to make it easier to kind of read for our citizens and also for any like regulators from outside, be it at the state or the federal level, to kind of understand like what our flood ordinances are saying and kind of what they've been doing. And as Mark Sr. can attest to, these regulations really haven't changed much in their structure since the mid to late 70s. Now, Mark doesn't go back that far, but he goes back close to that far.
Appreciate that, Ben.
All right, next slide. So, as Wayne stated, we are in the draft text change process now, and we're going back to City Council on September 15th. And for them to officially authorize the text change. Once we have that, we would then go through the Planning Commission to kind of work the text change through the Planning Commission. But during that time, we anticipate doing a lot of community engagement, a lot of education, a lot of outreach to kind of get their input and let the community know kind of what's going on, because we did a decent amount of that last year with the stakeholder group. This would kind of be even more of that kind of going forward. And then once we've done that and been through the deliberations of the Planning Commission, they would send their final recommendation to the City Council, and then the City Council would then officially deliberate on this change and move forward or not, or some modification thereof. Next slide. So the fun part is that staff got to put on a real estate hat, and I'm using fun in quotation marks. Sarcasm doesn't come through WebEx as well as it should. But so basically we went to estimate the potential loss of tax revenue by these undeveloped properties not being allowed to develop under this new text change. So what we did was look at the vacant properties that were completely in the floodplain and or a majority over 50% in the floodplain, and kind of took what their tax revenue was today and compared it with adjacent tax revenue for properties that were developed that were near them. And so we basically took a broad brush to kind of say the development potential of these properties without going property by property and using an appraiser. So basically calculated that potential loss of increased tax revenue that the city's wouldn't be getting, because obviously the city would be getting increased tax revenue if these properties were allowed to develop and that sort of thing. So essentially those losses for all the vacant properties that would not be allowed to develop was $1.2 million. So that's a $1.2 million loss of potential tax revenue. And just for some context, that's about 0.44% of the total tax revenue projection for fiscal year 2021. So it's under 0.5% of what our revenue projection is for fiscal year 2021. And technically that revenue projection doesn't even count the increase in tax revenue that we're talking about. So it just kind of gives a little bit of context.
Ben, did you, recognizing this is hard to quantify, but did you make any attempt to quantify the benefit to the city in terms of like not having to spend drainage assistance dollars maybe down the road?
Yeah, and one thing that the first thing that I went to from some of my grant experience to kind of quantify was that if these properties are no longer developed, then we won't necessarily have to do any rescues to them during flooding events and things like that with our police or fire department. And I reached out to the fire and rescue folks, and they don't put an exact number on it, but their main concern was not having to send people out there. Like they don't have a budgetary amount for that, but they said not having to send personnel out there was probably their biggest savings that they could see. But definitely not having to spend drainage assistance money or not having to help these properties or even flood insurance claims, because everyone pays for flood insurance claims because it's paid out of the National Flood Insurance Program, which is a government agency. So, I mean, we're all kind of footing that bill, but that's a very good point. But those benefits are definitely there. So this was kind of our broad brush to check just what a potential loss of revenue would be to the city for this. And we were pretty happy that we were well under 1%, and even under 0.5% of kind of what our potential revenue could be. So.
Yeah, and I think also, again, even harder to quantify, but by keeping this development out of the floodway fringe, we enhance the value of properties that are close to the stream because you have a nicer stream.
Yeah, that's very true.
Anyway, just kind of wanted to read that into the record.
Yeah, no, it's perfect.
Really can't be calculated here, but
well, and
hasn't caught up.
These are good talking points too. If you guys have any more that we can take to City Council when we meet with them on September 15th, because this same basic presentation is going to be given to City Council as well.
Yeah, one other item that we've talked about that isn't included in here is, and we've heard this from developers, they like their properties to be near green spaces, greenways, and so forth, and it likely would actually increase the value of adjacent properties to the floodway by having that green space there. So that's not accounted for in its calculation either.
Can I interrupt one more time before we go to the communications slide?
Yeah.
I think we've touched on this before, but maybe you could remind me. So for property that's already been developed in the floodway fringe, let's say there's an old strip mall, they want to tear it out, start over with some other kind of new development. Are these revised regulations, would they impact that redevelopment of the property? Or how would they impact it?
If they do not subdivide their current property, then they would still retain the right to redevelop that property. But they couldn't, but they'd still be adhering to the 50% rule that's currently on our books now as far as those regulations go.
Okay, thank you.
Ben, one quick question that came through the chat that I think is relevant, related to the CRS and the flood insurance savings. Are those savings automatic, or do property owners have to request those?
We would have to update that once we pass this regulation and kind of update our application for CRS to show that our regulations don't allow any new development in the floodway fringe.
But then property owners wouldn't have to do anything else themselves. Is that correct?
No, they would not.
Okay.
City staff would have to do all that.
And the CRS records and are those kept by the city? And those are public records, I assume?
They are public records. They're kept by the city, and they're they're also kept by the National Flood Insurance Program.
Great. Thanks. That was the only chat questions.
Okay. And I think at this point, I passed over to Kristen.
Hey, everybody. You can change the slide, Kelly. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about the communications plan, a broad overview of what we're hoping to do for this project. To start, you can see what a strategy is typically made up of, and we'll go through all of these elements in the presentation. Next slide. So this project has two main goals, the first being informing people about potential changes or recommendations to the regulations, and information will go to individuals impacted by the recommendations as well as those who are exempt. And the idea is that this communication would fall after we go to City Council through the text change process if all goes well. And then the second goal is a little bit more long term, and that's to educate and bring more awareness to the floodplain, how it works and what people need to know in order to stay safe. And the goal with that would be to amplify communications we've already done about the floodplain and continue to grow that as we move forward past the text change process. Next slide. And then we have a breakdown of the different audiences that we'll be reaching. We have residents and property owners. So this includes property owners of vacant lots, individuals living in the floodplain, including renters. We'll also be working with our development services to reach the development community, and then other stakeholders like City Council and community groups. This is a really good opportunity for the commission if you have community members or organizations who you think would benefit from hearing about this project. Let us know, because we can include it in our distribution or provide you with a link to information or other communications material so that you can share that with them since you have the relationship with them already. Next slide. And then this just gives you an example of the different tactics that we have available to us. We're working primarily in digital, print, and public relations. A few highlights there. Most of this content, and primarily the print as well as an online survey, is available in Spanish. And then we've shifted how we normally would do in-person interactions with the community to doing virtual touch points. So there's an option to do a virtual meeting live like we're doing now, or to do a pre-recorded touch point that gives information about the project and then an opportunity for individuals to provide input or speak to staff if they have further questions. Next slide. And then these last two slides are more background information for you. This is an overall of Stormwater's reach in the communications that we do and the channels that we use. So the last three bullet points are general day-to-day, but then you'll see the information that we have for individuals living in the floodplain. So that would be campaign specific. And an important piece to note here is that even though this is our reach at the moment, since we're partnering with the city as a whole, as well as other departments in the city of Raleigh and community organizations, the goal is that we'd be able to amplify the communications being sent out and how we reach different individuals. Next slide. And this is also just background information, so you get an idea of how we work. Most of our work is done in-house through me and the communications department, so that does drive the communication strategy and the resources that we have available. We typically don't work with third-party individuals or consultants, so primarily all work is done by employees. And then based on the most recent community survey sent out to the city, the main way people like to receive information is through the website, and then other big channels that they like to receive content is TV, social media, and email. So the communication strategy will be built around that data, but we're also very mindful that we need to reach as many people as we can in the community. So when we're developing the strategy more specifically, we'll try to create tactics based on the goal. So not every goal will have the same tactic, but we really try to close the loop. So for example, print content will have email information, phone number, and a web link, so that if someone receives something in the mail, they can either contact staff directly for more information or visit the website to learn more. And then vice versa for our digital platforms. If we put something out on social media, that'll link back to the website, which will have contact information for staff. So we're really trying to close the loop and make sure the web of communications is as accessible as possible. And that's all I had on communication. So I think we can go back for questions.
Great, thanks, Wayne and Kristen. Are there any questions from commission members? All right, I'm not seeing any questions right now, but Kristen, thank you very much. That was really helpful on the communications plan. And Wayne, are you gonna follow up now on our final review of the draft work plan and annual report?
I am. So we have made, we've received a couple of comments on the annual report. And so we've made some modifications. Let me go ahead and share my screen and talk through that very, very briefly. One of the changes was let's put a better picture on the front, which I think was a good suggestion. I think the chair made that suggestion. So this is a photo of a bioretention stormwater control measure in front of a recently completed City of Raleigh fire station. So I think that's a good example of the types of controls and projects that that we're putting in as part of city projects these days. So good suggestion. We made that edit. And another minor change and suggestion that was made was we added the mission of the commission on the next page in the first text page of the annual report is a good reminder of what we're all trying to achieve together. I didn't receive any other comments on the annual report. I'd be glad to receive any now, minor changes or other comments at this point, if anyone would like to make one, or if you're ready to accept it.
Yeah, any other final thoughts, comments, requests for revisions on the work plan and annual report for Wayne?
Look good to me.
I thought it was very good.
Yeah, Wayne, thank you for making those changes. I do think it looks really good. I like that photo on the front. One question, Wayne, today, are we making a motion to accept the annual report, or is there something that's going to go to council? Or I guess that does go to council as our annual report.
Correct. Yes. So the motion today would be to accept and adopt the annual report as well as the FY21 work plan. And then those would be presented at a future city council meeting by SMAC for council to accept those as well.
Okay, yes. Gotcha. Well, if there are no more sort of questions or revisions, edits on that, is there a motion to adopt the annual report and work plan? All right, we have a second. All right, I'm gonna say we got a second from David, and we'll go ahead and vote now. All in favor? All right, looks good. It appears unanimous, Wayne. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And let me just give a quick shout out, kudos to Kristen Freeman, who you just heard. She was the primary preparer of the annual report. So many thanks to Kristen for her help there.
Good work.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kristen.
Happy to help.
All right, Wayne, do you have anything coming through on public comment?
Let me see if I have any more. Okay, so actually, yes, there was one more question came out about the text change, and would the text change become more or less stringent than it currently is? I think that's a question related to the floodplain text change. So I'll answer that, but Ben, jump in if I say anything wrong. As proposed, the text change would be more stringent in terms of not allowing new development in the floodplain. So it would be added restrictions on development in the floodplain. Just to clarify that. And as I guess a further clarification, a reminder, I think we mentioned this, but so we are proposing to bring that to City Council at the September 15th City Council meeting. And the chair, Mr. Page, will be there with me to present those recommendations. It was a recommendation that came through the commission, which you all have voted on previously, so that's already been supported. This is really just some additional process items, as well as to help answer the questions that had come from City Council last time we presented it. So I think we're ready to go on that. We'd welcome any additional support or anyone else who would like to be involved in that. Thank you. And I think that's all I had, Mr. Chair. And that's all the additional questions. Oh, I do see, I'm sorry, I do see a question. Who, Mr. Chair, who made the motion to approve the annual report and work plans?
I want to say Evan made the first motion, and then I had a second from David.
Great, thank you.
That's what I had. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys.
That's right.
Okay.
Good, thank you. That was just a minute's question. Appreciate it.
Great, sounds good. Well, are there any other final thoughts or comments from commission members before we adjourn today? Ms. Graham, do you want to? Yeah, there you go. Great. Ms. Graham, I think you're still on mute right now. Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, thank you, Chairman Page. I have a couple of questions in two different areas, if we have time to entertain those at this point. One of them is concerning the heavy rainfall that we had earlier this week, and I was wondering if stormwater management staff had any comments or observations that they'd like to share about that, or particularly how the city fared, and if there were any takeaways from the experience or anything we learned from it that might improve things going forward.
Yes, I'd be glad to take that, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mike.
Yes, it was a significant rainfall. And it was highly variable across the city. So the first comment I'd like to make, the gauge adjusted radar rainfall system that we have implemented as part of our pilot flood early warning system that we've mentioned to you was very helpful. in terms of seeing that variability across the city, and gave us a lot better understanding of that rainfall and how it varied than we would have had with just rain gauges. So we saw rainfall from 2 inches to up to about 6 inches. And in some pockets of town, that 6 inches fell in about 3 to 3.5 hours. So if you look at our current statistical frequency analysis, that was those pockets, which were mostly in the northeast part of downtown along Capitol Boulevard, inside the Beltline, was the hardest hit. And there were some pockets in southeast that were almost as hard hit. That was almost a 500 years return period storm. So about a 0.2% annual chance of a storm that heavy hitting in any given year. So there was some flooding, especially in those areas. You may have seen from news reports that Capitol Boulevard, right in the vicinity south of the Beltline, in the vicinity of Pigeon House Branch, where Bobby Murray Chevrolet used to be. There used to be a bowling alley, a Dunkin' Donuts, the Milner Inn, all of which the city has bought out, but definitely would have flooded under this event. And there was flooding at the First Citizens Bank. That building flooded by about 3 feet. There's a used tire store, All Day Tires, flooded by several feet. And then Watkins Grill, which is right next to Crabtree Creek and actually in the floodway, also flooded. So there were some significant impacts to some commercial areas there. There were a couple of homes that flooded up in the western Northridge area. That's in the area where we are just beginning a project. We're negotiating with a consultant to do some stormwater improvements. That's one of our capital improvement projects that we're moving forward with right now. We had some road overtopping as well. And our staff, kudos to Scott Bryant, Barbara Maranta, and Kelly Daniel, they were up late and through the night monitoring the rain gauges over the course of that storm event. And this was one that caught us a little bit by surprise. I think it even caught the National Weather Service by surprise in terms of how severe it was. But there was additional road topping showed by our gauges along Wake Forest Road overtopped, Rose Lane overtopped, which is in southeast Raleigh. And that's one that is significant. We are doing a study looking at that right now. And that one's significant because that Rose Lane in that area is the only way in and out for a neighborhood of homes, about 55 or 60 homes in that area. So that's one where we have the flashing road signs and we're looking at ways to upgrade that road for these situations, but that road did overtop as well. So in terms of lessons learned, I think that this storm reinforced that we have to stay on top of these types of storms, even not hurricanes, right? These summer thunderstorms that can pop up very quickly, high intensity. This is happening more frequently, and I think it's a reinforcement for implementing the flood early warning system as we are moving forward with. We're moving into the second phase of that, which will make that project citywide. And I think it reinforces the value of that project and the benefits of having that in place, where many of these alarms can be automated and the responses can be much more quick for these types of events that come up very quickly and unexpected.
Thank you very much. And sure enough, I do have a primary concern about Rose Lane or for the exact same reason that you mentioned. And when we have overtopping of that particular road, there's no way for the residents there to enter, leave, receive emergency services, if any are needed during a critical period like that. I'm hoping that the White Oak Lake project that's been put on hold, and some of those funds reallocated to other projects, some of which you where you didn't name, maybe not able to name because they haven't been designated at this point. I'm hoping that you'll look at Rose Lane to do something about that there. So thank you very much for that. So I have one other question, please. And that one is concerning, it's a question about the Biltmore Hills Park grant. How much is the total grant funding for that project?
Kevin, do you have that number in front of you? I know the city's contribution, I believe, is $100,000 as a match, but I'm afraid I don't have the total number. Yep.
Okay, and Kevin, you don't either?
I am looking for it. It is very close to $350,000 for the total project, with up to $100,000 being contributed by city stormwater. Ms. Graham, I'll get you and the whole commission the exact numbers.
Okay, and one other question related to that project, please. I'm interested in understanding what this particular project is supposed to correct or prevent as far as stormwater is concerned.
Like many of the stormwater control devices that we, or most that we install on our own as opposed to developers, it's a combination of removing pollutants from runoff, comes from impervious surfaces such as buildings and parking lots and streets, but also to reduce the amount of stormwater being introduced to the drainage system and ultimately to the creeks downstream, which, you know, for a given small stormwater control measure is not, you know, a lot of a reduction, but taken cumulatively and spread, you know, across a watershed, they can make a substantial difference in the amount of runoff and contribution to flooding.
So is this project, or do you know, is this project being done to help mitigate some of the stormwater that would be created by the proposed tennis courts that are going in that area?
No, they would not be treating runoff from the tennis courts, but you may know that representatives of the Tennis Association and other residents and stakeholders did meet with our parks director, who has committed to providing stormwater treatment to those tennis courts and the associated parking lot, even though it is not required by regulation.
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of interested in why this project and why now, because to my understanding, that stormwater has not ever been raised as an issue coming from Biltmore Park, but maybe that's a discussion for another day. And thank you very much for your response.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Graham. Thanks, Kevin. Are there any other final thoughts, comments, or questions from other members of the commission before we adjourn?
Mr. Chair, may I make one more comment in response to Ms. Graham's question?
Yes, please go ahead, Wayne.
Okay, I did want to address the Rose Lane and the status of that, as well as the reallocation. The reallocation, we have put together a proposal. I'd be glad to share that with you. The proposal is there's about $4.6 million from White Oak Lake. 2.5 of that goes to money that we had taken from the Western Northridge project last year, because the Brockwood Dam project came in overbid. And so that money is proposed to be reallocated. We're refunding drainage assistance monies, as well as several other projects that have gone over. So at this point, there's none of the reallocation money is proposed to go to Rose Lane. Now that Rose Lane the study is just finishing up. We have $1.6 million allocated in the CIP for Rose Lane and Glenbrook Avenue areas. Some of that was used for the study money, but there is available money remaining. We're just now getting in some of the cost information, but because of the Rose Lane issue in particular being a one-way in, one-way out, and because of the proposal by the floodplain stakeholders group to make 100-year dry access a requirement for new development, that's the standard that staff is using for that particular project because of the proposals for the new development. If that's the case, upgrading Rose Lane to that condition is going to be probably an $8 to $10 million project, just for perspective. So that would not be something that would fit into our CIP easily in the near future, given our entire fiscal year 21 CIP is $6.5 million. So I just want to give the commission a perspective that is a significant project that we're going to have to look at, likely rate increases or perhaps bonding, which we've started to talk about in the future, to fund a project of that significance. So I just wanted to give that perspective at this point based on Ms. Graham's comments.
Yeah, any possibility of us getting some federal money for that?
It's certainly something we could look at, and if you have
Okay.
suggestions on grant programs, we do keep an eye on grant programs. Kevin had mentioned the Section 319 grant from EPA that we got. In general, though, the grant programs available for stormwater are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars type of time frame. But it's possible if there's infrastructure funding that may come at the national level, which is being discussed and has been discussed for a number of years now, but hasn't happened. But we're keeping an eye on those types of opportunities, ma'am, and we'll certainly pursue them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wayne, this is Kevin again, and Ms. Graham, I did find the number. I was pretty close on my memory. The whole project cost or budget is about $340,000, and the city's contribution will be up to $100,000.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer.
All right. Any other final thoughts before we close?
I'll make just one more comment. I had the opportunity to attend the webinar on August 11th called Water Rising, Equitable Approaches to Urban Flooding. And just want to thank Mr. Miles and Reverend Taylor for representing Raleigh so well there and showcasing some excellent work by the city and by neighborhood organizations and faith organizations to deal with stormwater. It was an excellent presentation.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kane. I will note, as a result of that presentation, I've had quite a few inquiries from others who watched that, and most of the interest that I've received is about SMAC and this commission and how it operates and how it came into be and how it represents the community. So kudos to you all. It does seem that this commission is fairly unique to stormwater programs across the country. And so we definitely appreciate all of y'all's input and time. We got a lot of feedback that folks liked the concept of having a commission like this.
That's cool. Yeah. Thanks, guys, for being a part of that. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn our meeting today?
I'll move that we adjourn.
All right. We have a second?
Second.
All right. Good deal. And all in favor? There it is. Unanimous. Thank you all. Look forward to seeing you next time.